Welcome to Crucial Conversations for Radical Educators. I am Kamilah Mitchell, and I'm presenting at the fourth biannual Equity Conference in 2026 on February 28th, 2026. My session is titled Responding to the Real, Restorative Practice That Works in Real Classrooms. And I am here today to give you a little snippet of what you can expect at the conference. So again, with the title, Responding to the Real, you already know that the workshop, the circle, is going to be about practicing having intentional conversations within the classroom. The overview will help educators shift from policing behavior to understanding the need, from reacting to responding, from compliance to community. So participants will practice a restorative lens that honors students' context, reduces harm, and builds classrooms where belonging is real, not performative. So, first things first, we'll gather in circle. In circle, oftentimes there's a talking piece or a piece, for example, it could be a mug. A talking piece or an important value that everyone shares can be circled around with the talking piece. So start off with an introduction with what is everyone's important value. That value can be, why did you start in education? What is real conversations that you have in education? With that, go around the circle, give everyone an opportunity to share their value and why they are there within the workshop. The learning goals: by the end of the workshop, participants will be able to identify the unmet needs underneath common student behaviors, practice language that restores instead of escalates, recognize adult responses that unintentionally contribute to the harm. And I want to emphasize on that one because I feel as educators, we forget that adult responses unintentionally contribute to the harm. And then last but not least, we reflect on the power and how it shapes classroom climate. So the teacher and the student harm that often occurs is where we have to have those real conversations with each other and how we respond, how we look at the student, how we hear the students, and even our own triggers. So going back to after we take the breather, we've already did the go around with the values. We will set agreements, and those agreements can be brief. We can listen to understand, no shaming. We already identified the talking piece. So when one person is using a talking piece or has their voice to the circle or to the table, we are allowing one person to speak at a time and to speak from lived experiences. So again, those are just agreements that we could create, but as a group, those agreements will be created and agreed on together. And then after we do the opening set agreements, there will be like a mini conversation around behavior communications. So we will share, what is behavior at the surface? What is the need at the roots? So really identifying, I know oftentimes as educators, when we're teaching or we're in the midst of something like I just showed with my slide deck switching up on me, that we have to pivot. And in that pivot, oftentimes when it comes to a pivot of identifying behavior, we don't have 5 minutes to do all of the breakdown. Like, what is the surface? What's the need of, like, in that moment, we're just trying to repivot to get back to the classroom culture of teaching. However, it is important for us to slow down so we can identify the behavior, redirect the behavior, and still set the tone of the classroom. And then after the mini conversation around behavior communication, we will go into the core activity around before the harm, there was a need. So with this type of activity, it will really be like a heart-led workshop and really for us to identify what are challenging behaviors and how have we looked at those challenging behaviors within our classroom. How have we in the past kind of redirected or had problems redirecting those challenging behaviors, and what was the unmet need under it, and just really get into the core of one behavior that we all have experienced, and we can do it as a shared group or in participant-led groups where they can discuss those challenging behaviors, what they may have done to meet the challenging behaviors, but then identifying the unmet need under it all and reframing it from like more of a human-centered lens. and allow people in that activity to kind of share out, for us to kind of support each other on um, our human lens experience, and saying like, this may have been how I would have handled it, or this is where I see the surface behavior was. This is where I see the need, the root of the behavior is. So this will give participants a time to kind of share out with each other, share out as a group, and kind of support each other on how we identify that behavior and support behaviors. And then we'll have like a radical reflection and discuss like, where does our power sit? How does our tone show up when we are addressing situations? Our bias, who gets our patience, who doesn't get our patience, who gets ignored? Like, really having those moments of reflection, and how we address situations in the moment when there's a classroom disruption or a classroom behavior that needs to be addressed. And then we'll practice language that restores. Language, instead of "why are you yelling," to "I want to understand what's underneath this, tell me what you need right now." Instead of "calm down, let's breathe together for a second." So we will practice different language that restores with certain experiences and scenarios that we had shared out before. And then in closing, we will just make a commitment to one shift. I'll ask educators to like write down one thing they would do differently tomorrow to show up restoratively. So this closes in everyone's identified tone. This closes in everybody's identified ways that they would like to uh, react and even restore challenging behaviors within the classroom, or even challenging biases that oftentimes interfere with how we address those challenging behaviors within the classroom. So again, that was just a little snippet. I look forward to hearing more about the the challenges that a lot of us have met in the classroom, and how we restore it with our own taking a breath, helping make sure that the whole space is slowing down and meeting that slow down tone of taking a breath before we go in and get to the need and the roots of what is really creating and causing the challenging behavior for the students. So look forward to seeing everyone February 28th at the fourth Equity Conference. And yes, thank you for tuning in. Dr. Q, thank you for all that you do for all of us. And be sure to stay tuned for all the magical things for Minty. And there's more beautiful conference educators that will be presenting as well. So look forward to seeing you all.